Coach David Osai walked off the basketball court at Jefferson Middle School in Columbus, Ohio, on a Tuesday evening in March. Walked off not because the game was lost, and not because a player had fouled out, but because he had just been handed a note by the athletic director telling him that 2 families had threatened to pull their sons from the program unless he addressed the situation with the Holloway boy, and Coach Osai had read the note, folded it in half, put it in his jacket pocket, walked back onto the court, called a timeout, looked at his starting lineup, looked at 12-year-old Marcus Holloway on the bench where he had been sitting for 11 minutes of the second half, and said, "Marcus, you're starting." Marcus Holloway had looked up. He had said, "Coach, I thought Coach Osai said, you're starting." Now Marcus had stood up, pulled off his warm-up jacket, and walked onto the court. He scored 19 points in the final 12 minutes. Jefferson Middle won by 8. And when Steve Harvey heard the full story on the Family Feud stage 14 months later, he walked to Coach Osai, gripped his hand with both of his, and said 6 words that the studio did not expect, and that 247 million people would repeat for weeks. It was a Monday afternoon in May, 14 months after the game, when the Osei-Holloway Family Alliance walked onto the Family Feud stage. Coach Osei, his wife Abena, Marcus Holloway, Marcus's mother Tracy, and Marcus's uncle Jerome, who had driven from Cleveland and was wearing a Holloway Stack 14 jersey he had bought online the previous weekend. Steve took one look at Marcus and said, "Young man, how tall are you?" Marcus said 6 feet, maybe a little more. Steve said, "At 13? Marcus said, "Coach says I still have room." Steve looked at Coach Osai and said, "Is this your son?" Coach Osai said, "He's mine." He said it without hesitation. Marcus looked at the floor for a half second, the way boys look when something matters and they are not going to show how much. Steve saw it. He filed it. He kept moving. Tracy Holloway, at the podium beside Abena, smiled at all the right moments. She was good at it. She had spent 14 months holding the public face of a mother whose child had been benched for reasons that had nothing to do with basketball. And she had made a decision early that her face was not going to be the place that decision showed itself. But anyone watching her eyes when Steve mentioned Marcus's name would have seen it. The specific brightness of a woman who has been through something that could have broken her child and did not, and who is still a little astonished by that every day. Nobody in that studio knew yet what had happened in the 11 minutes Marcus sat on that bench. But that wasn't even the part that would make Steve Harvey grip a man's hand with both of his. Marcus Holloway had been playing basketball since he was 6 years old. By 10, he was the best player in his age group at the Columbus Youth Athletic Association, a fact documented by 2 separate coaches who had evaluated him for travel team placement, and both described him in their reports as exceptional, advanced court vision, elite acceleration, natural leadership instinct. He had joined the Jefferson Middle School team in 6th grade and had been the starting point guard in every game of both his 6th and 7th grade seasons. His scoring average in 7th grade was 17.4 points per game. He had the best field goal percentage on the team. He had never been suspended, never received a technical foul, never missed a practice. The note had arrived in Coach Osai's school inbox on the Friday before the Tuesday game. It was from the athletic director, forwarding a complaint from 2 families, the Harpers and the Lowells, who were parents of 2 bench players on the team. The complaint stated that they were concerned about team culture and the direction of the program, and used language that circled its meaning without landing on it directly until the final sentence, which said that they expected the coach to ensure all players receive appropriate playing time in a way that reflects the overall composition and community of the program. Coach Osei had read it 3 times. He understood what it said. He called the athletic director that evening. He asked, specifically, are these families asking me to reduce Marcus Holloway's playing time? The athletic director said, they're asking for a more balanced approach. Coach Osai said, Marcus is the starting point guard. His statistics justify his position. Is there a performance-based complaint about his play? The athletic director said there was not. Coach Osai said, then I'll handle it. He ended the call. He sat at his kitchen table for a while that evening. Abina came in and brought him tea and sat across from him. She said, the Harper and Lowell families? He looked at her. He said, how did you? She said, because I was waiting for it. He said, it hasn't even been. She said, David, it's been exactly long enough. He held the teacup. He said, what do I do? She said, you know what to do. He said, if I bench him to quiet them, she said, you know what to do. He said, it'll cost me. She said, it'll cost Marcus more. He said nothing for a moment. Then he nodded. He said, okay. She said, okay. He benched Marcus for 11 minutes of the second half of the Tuesday game. He did not want to. He did it because the athletic director had called again Monday morning and said the families were at the point of escalation, and because Coach Osai was trying to find the line between protecting his job and protecting his player, and he miscalculated it by 11 minutes. He knew it while he was doing it. He watched Marcus sit on that bench with his warm-up jacket on and his hands in his lap, watching the game with the composed, patient expression of a boy who had been taught to hold himself together in situations he hadn't earned, and Coach Osai felt the miscalculation in his chest the entire time. Then, the note was handed to him at the bench during the timeout. A second note. This one from the Harpers, directly, saying they were satisfied with the adjustment and looked forward to continued progress. Coach Osai read it. He folded it. He put it in his pocket. He called Marcus his name. Marcus scored 19 in 12 minutes. The team won. The Harpers and the Lowells were in the bleachers. They left before the final buzzer. Coach Osai told Marcus after the game. He called him into his office, a supply closet repurposed as a coach's room, 4 folding chairs and a whiteboard, and he closed the door and he sat across from the boy and he said, Marcus, I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear it from me directly. He told him everything. Marcus sat with it for a moment. He said, Coach, did they bench me because of me? Coach Osai said, no, they benched you because of them. And I let it happen for 11 minutes, and that was 11 minutes too many, and I'm sorry. Marcus said you put me back in. Coach Osai said I should never have taken you out. Marcus said, Coach. Coach Osai said, yeah. Marcus said we won. Coach Osai said we did. Marcus said, okay. He stood up. He shook his coach's hand. He walked out. Tracy found out that night. From Marcus, who told her in the car on the way home in the particular factual way he told her difficult things. Low voice, face forward, eyes on the road even though he was in the passenger seat. She sat with it. She said, how do you feel? He said, fine. She said, Marcus. He said, I knew it wasn't me, Mama. Coach made sure I knew. She said, Coach told you? He said, right after the game. She said, okay. She drove the rest of the way in silence. When they got home, she sat in the parked car for a few minutes while Marcus went inside. She said, to the windshield, okay. Then she went in. She filed a complaint with the Columbus City Schools Office of Equity and Inclusion the following week. She documented everything Coach Osei had shared with her and everything Marcus had observed. Coach Osei provided his own written account, submitted voluntarily. The inquiry took 6 weeks. The findings confirmed a pattern of race-based pressure on coaching staff and recommended mandatory training for school athletic programs on equitable selection criteria. The Harper and Lowell families withdrew their sons from the team at the end of the season. The team went on to win their district championship the following year, with Marcus Holloway as the starting point guard. His scoring average that year was 21.2 points per game. Steve Harvey would later call what Coach Osai did at the bench, folding the note, calling Marcus's name, the most important coaching decision he had ever heard described. The fast money round was done. The Osei-Holloway team had scored 178 points when Steve looked at Coach Osei and said, "You said he's yours. Tell me what you meant." Coach Osei told the story. He told it the way he told everything. Direct, specific, no performance. When he got to the part about folding the note and calling Marcus his name, Marcus, standing 2 positions away at the podium, looked straight ahead. His jaw moved. He didn't say anything. Steve watched him for a moment. Then he said, "Marcus, what did you feel when he said your name?" Marcus said, "Like the bench didn't win." Steve looked at him for a long time. Then he said, "Like the bench didn't win." He repeated it quietly, to himself. Like the bench didn't win. The studio fell completely silent. Steve Harvey placed his cards down. He walked a few paces and stood with his back to the audience. He stood that way for a moment. When he turned back, his eyes were wet. He said, "Stop everything. No network. No game. This room. Right now." A stage manager moved toward him. He held up his hand. He said, "This has never happened on this stage. A coach telling me he called a boy's name instead of keeping his job quiet. And a boy saying like the bench didn't win. That is every child who ever sat somewhere they shouldn't have been sitting. And that is every man who ever decided that a child mattered more than a note." He walked to Coach Osai. He gripped his hand with both of his. He said to the whole room, "Run. Nobody can bench that." He held on for a moment. He said, "Let me tell you something. When I was living in my Ford Tempo, nobody called my name. Nobody said you're starting. I had to wait a long time before someone decided I was worth putting on the court. And I know what those 11 minutes feel like. I know what it costs a child to sit somewhere that tells him he doesn't belong, and I know what it means when someone calls your name anyway." He turned to Marcus. He said, "Marcus Holloway, you're starting. You are always starting." He wasn't done. He pulled out his phone and called his business manager on the stage of Family Feud. He said, "I need a full 4-year college athletic scholarship fund established for Marcus Holloway to be applied when he reaches collegiate level, at whatever institution he chooses. And I need Coach David Osai to know that the Harvey Foundation is naming the new gymnasium grant for the Columbus Youth Athletic Center after him." Coach Osai court. He ended the call. He turned to both families, announced the full $20,000 for each, and invited the competing family, the Stewarts from Indianapolis, to cross the stage. Their teenage son, 15 years old, walked straight to Marcus and said, "I play too." Marcus said, "What position?" He said, "Point." Marcus said, "Don't let them take you out." He said, "Nobody's taking me out." Marcus said, "Good." The episode aired 7 weeks later, 247 million views. The hashtag #LikeTheBenchDidn'tWin trended for 9 days in 17 countries. The Columbus City Schools superintendent issued a new policy requiring that any coaching adjustment based on parent pressure include mandatory equity review within 48 hours, effective immediately. Coach David Osai was named Columbus City Schools Coach of the Year that spring. At the ceremony, the athletic director who had handed him the note sat in the 3rd row and did not speak. 3 months after the taping, Coach Osai framed both notes, the Harper-Lowell note and the timeout note. He put them on the wall of his office, the supply closet room with the 4 folding chairs, not as trophies but as reminders. He told his players, when they asked, that's what a bad decision looks like. And that's what fixing it looks like. Study both. A year after the taping, Marcus Holloway was named to the Columbus City Schools All-District First Team. His coach that year, a new coach, Coach Osai, having been promoted to varsity at the high school, called his name on the first day of practice and said, "Holloway, you're starting." Marcus said, "I know." He said it without arrogance, just certainty, the kind you carry when someone you trust has already called your name. Today, the Full Court Foundation, named for the moment Coach Osei returned Marcus to the full court, provides equity advocacy, coaching education, and scholarship support for Black student athletes facing race-based benching and playing time manipulation in public school sports programs. Its motto, taken from what Marcus said on the Family Feud stage, is, like the bench didn't win. The foundation has documented 89 cases across 12 states, achieved policy changes in 6 school districts, and funded partial scholarships for 34 student athletes. Have you ever had someone call your name when the room said sit down? Have you ever chosen a child over the easier path? Share your story in the comments. If Coach Osai's decision moved you, subscribe. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And remind them, your worth is not determined by someone else's comfort with your presence on the court.